Do you ever wonder how great leaders in the community make things happen? When they encounter new, unexpected challenges like a pandemic, how do they continue to successfully make an impact? Welcome to That Sounds Terrific, the podcast that connects you with these amazing people. Get insights on what they do to meet their goals, find out how you can help them in their mission, and learn their methods so you can be more successful at what you do. Welcome to That Sounds Terrific with host Nick Koziel.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of That Sounds Terrific. Joining me today is the terrific Debra Ross. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, I was so excited that you said yes to this because when I first attended Visit Rochester, the first meeting, it was like 2 years ago plus, one of the first people I met was you. And the way that I met you was talking very excitedly about the future eclipse that was going to happen in Rochester. And so I'm like, I got to get to know that eclipse lady. And I knew there was so, and then flash forward to where we are today, and we have so many interesting little connections through data science and through kidsoutandabout.com and all these other things that I'm like, how did I not know you before?
Well,
right?
you do now.
I do now. And you were just sharing me with something with me offline where we were talking about relationships and how they grow and the interesting data behind it. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay.
I just definitely want to have the audience kind of find out who you are, so they get to know you like I have. And let's start with that. Like, who is Debra Ross?
Oh gosh. Well, the thing that I do and have done as a profession for the last 23 years is I'm publisher of a web network called kidsoutandabout.com, which started right here in Rochester, New York in 2001. At the time, those of you who remember 2001 may remember that there wasn't such a thing as a web calendar back then. But I had one toddler and one kid on the way, and I was finding out all about all of these amazing things happening in Rochester that were kid and family friendly, and realizing that I was finding out about them after the fact.
Yep.
So I heard about it on the radio or on TV or whatever. And I thought to myself, darn, there should be one website where everybody can go and all of the organizations can post to it so that, and all the parents can read that so that they know what's happening. I know it sounds so quaint at this point,
but you were the pioneer. You were the pioneer in web calendars.
And what I had just been doing was actually, I mean, the web was a toddler at the time too,
True.
right?
Yeah.
I started out, so I was an English major in college, which means that you could do either everything or nothing. So I opted for everything.
Me too.
And I went into technology and publishing technology in the 90s. And so I was doing a lot of enterprise management software setup and training people to do that. And so once the web came in kind of 1996, we started e-commerce. And so that's what I had been doing for the few years prior to having kids, and had my own consulting business to do that. And so I took on my maternity leave from my consulting business with my second daughter. I said, somebody should do this. Well, the somebody oughta has happened so much that became me. And so I started this just as a lark, just as a community service to the Rochester area. And that is the business that took off, that people were hungry for that kind of information, especially in a pre-social media era. And they signed up for the newsletter in droves. But the technology was sort of behind. So you had to be a nerd to run it in the early aughts. But once the technology caught up with the expansion vision in 2009, we reinvented the site on a Drupal content management system so that regular people could work in it, not just the HTML nerds, and started expanding around the country. So we are currently in 52 regions in the US and Canada. We have 15 million readers a year. We have 800,000 who get our weekly newsletter. And I have a staff of 21, all based right here in Rochester to help that all happen. This is not just like a one-person enterprise anymore. But it's awesome. Great because it means that I've been essentially studying communities and community success for almost a quarter century. And I am absolutely fascinated about how people define success. And that became really important too as my business grew. and I needed to keep a staff with me. How do we define success together, and what does it all mean? How do you design a system, or like a lot of systems,
Yeah.
so that you can get the kind of work that you want to get done, meaningful work, and how do you then measure that according to your own sort of definitions of success? So being able to be inspired by so many communities all over the country, like I sort of just massed a lot of thoughts about that. So yeah, and then when I was sort of stunned into understanding eclipses back in 2017. And when my daughter dragged me to the Midwest to see the 2017's eclipse, the last total solar eclipse.
Mhm.
The last total solar eclipse before 2017 wasn't since 1979 in the US.
Mhm.
And so the memory of what that's like had kind of been lost. But so then we were all just sort of stunned into here's what that experience is. And it's like no other experience on Earth. And then I realized, of course, knowing that there was going to be one coming through Rochester in 2024, as my daughter kind of says, on the way home from that trip to Missouri on that road trip, I kind of went insane and realized, all right, there needs to be a task force, and we need to get this started early so that we can super succeed in this as a community. And then, again, in the somebody oughta
Mhm.
became me. From Kids Out and About, I sort of knew most people who get things done here in Rochester in
Mhm.
terms of like what's happening for the community. And so I also was the 2018 incoming chair of Visit Rochester's Visitor Industry Council. So
Mhm.
you saw me only 2 years out, but in 2018, I started every one of those monthly meetings
Yeah.
with what's happening on April 8th of 2024,
Mhm.
total solar eclipse. But it did, with humor and sort of momentum and glue and pom-poms and a newsletter that glued us all together. Basically, we got everybody doing what they needed to do so that our community, in fact, was able to
Yeah.
succeed.
Yeah, what you
So
do
that's
is,
who
like,
I am.
inspiring. Yeah, it
Thank
really yeah, I mean, and it was you you light up the room, right? Like, when people were coming in and, even the people like, "Oh, here comes the eclipse now." Like, I heard that, and I wasn't even like, "What the heck are they?" I'm like, I didn't even know what they were talking about, and "Here
you.
comes that eclipse girl." But
Indeed.
but what was nice was, like, everyone was sort of, like, on the edge of their seats, and it was still, like, 2 years out at that point for
Hmm.
so, I mean, and there's something to be said about that. Like, a person that can kind of draw people in, get them excited, get them in order, right? And have fun doing it.
Yep.
It's a great skill to have. And to top that off, it's not often that someone that loves data as much as you
Yeah.
do, it's also the person that can be like, that like riveting and like engaging.
Thank you.
So that was the kind of thing I'm like, I gotta have her on the show because I know she's gonna inspire someone. And that's kind of like what the show is all about. It's
Hmm.
uplifting what people are doing in the community. Kids Out and About does that. Visit Rochester does that. You do that, and so I guess my next question is like, what what got you to want to do all this? Like, how did you become that person that's like, oh, that's got to be me? I guess like I'm gonna be
So
the one to do it.
it's funny. I have friends, of course, from high school on Facebook because, yay, Facebook can connect
Yeah.
you with people like that you would not be connected with otherwise. And they kind of can't believe what I'm doing now because I was the kid in the back of the science class.
Uh-huh.
I was not out there. I was not enthusiastic.
Hmm.
Honestly, I didn't know. I was not raised by people who were giving me many life skills. And
Hmm.
so it was just a hard time. I I didn't know that you could just make things happen. In fact, the world of business seemed to me to be this magical thing that other people did. I knew how to do school. And
Hmm.
so I did school and I was good at school, but that I didn't find myself inspired about school. In fact, I hated school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until so I graduated high school, went to college and thought, okay, I can reinvent myself. I can be anything that I can be any way that I want to
Hmm.
be. So I thought, how do I want to be? Well, I want to be interested in things. I'm going to decide everything is interesting.
Hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to knock into really interesting people and professors in college who helped me understand that, in fact, everything was interesting. Although I didn't understand business or engineering or the highfalutin tech stuff was interesting until too late in college. I would have been a systems engineer if I had gotten this early.
Right.
As it was, I went the easy route because I could write. I became an English major, and then it was sort of too late. But it's never actually too
Yeah.
late to do anything
Hmm.
ever at all.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of how you want to spend your time, whether you want to invest the time to learn something. People think that they're just not math people, and
Hmm.
it drives me nuts because it's fine to decide that that's not how you want to spend your time. It's fine to say, you know what, my brain doesn't do that that easily. So I'm going to go and do this other thing that's valuable. That's fine. But the artificial pigeonholing of yourself into a certain role, I think, is just like one of the most stifling things ever. And it's, if I talk to anybody, it doesn't matter how old they are, but us, of course, like with kids especially, I just want to encourage them. Look, you're going to grow your whole life, and you have your whole life to learn stuff. Just decide everything is interesting, and it will be. And then you're never stuck in any particular place. You can always go back and learn more.
Yeah.
So, but I became somebody who sort of believed that passionately, having done that transformation, and realizing, oh wow, you really can sort of do anything you want.
And now it's
So
yeah, now it's kind of funny. Like here I am looking at you. I'm like, I could never imagine you as the quiet person in the back of the room.
nobody can,
So
so
so it's you've
nobody from
come
my
full
current life
circle.
believes that. Right. And people like,
Right.
I haven't actually ever gone to a high school reunion, but I mean, interacting with people when I,
Mhm.
mentioned that I'm on the radio, they're like, you're on the radio. I'm like, I've been on the radio every week for 15 years. So
That's awesome.
it's a strange, but like, it just proves that you can, as an adult, you can just decide to use whatever skill you have,
Yeah.
leverage that, and go on to the next thing, things
Yeah.
that are fun.
And up until this moment, honestly, like well, actually the other day, I would
Mhm.
have told you, and you would have like hated that I am not a math person, right? Like
Uh,
and honestly, it's funny. It's taken this EDD I mentioned again off air that I'm in classes, and our professor assigned some podcasts for us to listen to, which is right up my alley.
yeah.
And one of them is Joe Bowler, I think is the person on the fear of mathematics. And it's someone from
Mm,
Stanford University, and it was doing research that kind of sort of topples the conventional wisdom,
yeah.
and giving people the solid ways to allow them to harness the ability to excel at mathematics. And again, it's kind of like what you said. Like I went to college and I tried pretty much every major that you can think of, from like, voice major to music business to ending up in, education. But then I'm like, you know what? I don't want to student teach middle schoolers. So I ended up with an English degree and
Hmm.
a minor in education, setting me up to do everything, right?
Right.
So, so I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, and it's really cool. Um, but I would never, like, if you said that to me, I would never have believed you in saying that I could do math. And I still am like, I'm questioning it. But now I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? Um, Math is not my favorite, but maybe there is something that I can still learn, being the old dog learning new tricks kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the thing is, people learn math really differently from each other,
Yeah.
really differently. And our education system means that you have to force all kids, all 30 kids in a class, into one method of learning. And math is the worst because there's
Hmm.
just so many different angles at which you could approach it. We homeschooled 2 kids, only two, but they learned math completely differently.
Hmm.
One learned it really early, one learned it late. One was a very sort of visual spatial learner. And the other, we always said that she learned by fighting.
Hmm.
And that it just completely, imagine them in a classroom. One of
Hmm.
them would have succeeded, one of them would have failed. And
Hmm.
then that one would have thought that she's just can't do math, when
Yeah.
really it's just not a system where it allows for multiple kinds of learning. It just can't do it. It's not physically possible in the
Yeah.
way the system is structured. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
true.
your fault, Nick. It's
Yeah.
really not your fault.
It's not your
Not
fault.
kidding.
Well, it goes back to sixth grade. Let's just get into the psychology of it all. But I was getting the right answers but I
Mhm.
was not showing my work the way the teacher wanted. That I was not doing the system the way that they were teaching it. So I was losing points. And then I was losing, interest. And also I was getting mad,
Mhm.
because I'm like, here I am getting the right answer and here you're telling me it's wrong. So I'm like,
And
right then and there, I'm like, I'm out.
but isn't
Um,
that terrible? Because my husband had the same experience,
yeah,
probably the same year. He's a mathematician.
that's crazy.
That's the direction he went in because he
Yeah,
just was basically like, "No, I'm
I'm gonna
just
prove
gonna
you
do it
wrong.
my way.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
act so
awesome.
do I understand this thing?
Yeah,
That's the important thing,
yeah,
not am I fitting into your method?" And
right.
so I
Yeah.
think
I
about
could
what you could kill or not kill a kid with, that math is the
that
worst in
mentality.
that, though.
Yeah. 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 And I could talk to you forever about this, but kind of circling back into like let's go back into kids out and about. So you talked a
Sure.
little bit, about how, the internet's changed things. We have
Mhm.
social media now. So you've got a whole new slew of systems. You've got 20 something people under you. Like, what are you doing now that is successful? And what are the services that you offer throughout these, 50 plus places? That is helpful. Like, what is
Yeah.
Kids Out and About now?
Sure. So, I mean, what the thing that we've done is just basically, despite temptations, we've stayed absolutely true to our mission. So, our mission is to celebrate each of the regions that we're in by giving organizations that are doing stuff a free platform to promote what they're doing.
Hmm.
So, and we just stuck with that. We keep the lights on by taking local advertising for those experiences that our readers are looking for. So, we you can boost your listing, right? You can be in the top section of the calendar, highlighted with graphics. You can have
Hmm.
a content ad on the birthday party page talking about your birthday party options. You can have a video ad or an image ad. But we're really, really careful about what advertising we take because it needs to all be stuff that's celebrating local regions and is of interest to local families.
Right.
Um, and other people sell stuff and that's perfectly fine. We don't.
Hmm.
And it means that you're not like waving through clutter to get to the information you're
Yeah.
looking for. Our ads are what parents are looking for. Our content is what parents are looking for. So we stayed with that, didn't get distracted by social media. We, despite temptations, we are not a crowdsourced platform. So it's not that people are posting and like we could be a place where people could comment, like Yelp,
Hmm.
for example. Um, and that was a mess in 2006 that I didn't want to get into. That was how a lot of online newspapers were getting their content by that type of sort of water cooler crowdsourcing
Sure.
model. And while it would have brought more people there because people like to talk, we weren't going to do that. It was going to be purely if you provide activities for kids in your community, great, post
Hmm.
them, put your information there. And we weren't going to have like reviews or sniping or anything like so we were able to sort of stay away from that even though it was tempting to get visitors that way.
Right.
And it's tempting to take ads for stuff
Hmm.
or people want to do promoted posts all the time. We have to explain, no, we're not a blog, no, we're not going to let you pay us to do this thing. We're going to stay true to our mission. And so but by doing that, boy, we get to interact with great people. I mean, people who do things for kids and families in a community, they're great.
Hmm.
They're nice. They're not crappy people at all. So we get to hear and see about all of these things in the community. Like lots of places have no marketing budget at all,
Yeah.
but they get to be on the platform. And in some ways, they get to have these programs because they have a free way to distribute it. Little nature centers, little like
Hmm.
education, lending library, like little things like that. Man, it's a matter of great pride to us to be able to help them in their mission with no additional cost to us, really, as long as they're on our list, they're
Hmm.
posting. And then I get to learn about them.
Right.
And I mean, your podcast is called That Sounds Terrific.
Hmm.
And pretty much like I could go through the site and just look at all these things, Rochester, LA, Seattle, Miami, wherever, and say that sounds terrific. And it's a really
Yeah.
positive place for me to be day in and day out, right? And
Yeah.
interacting with the people who make it happen. I am endlessly fascinated by people who make things happen and always want to learn from them. And so,
Yeah.
you know, watching that over time, it helps me I get to see how businesses operate. I get to say, here's what I want to do as a business owner. Here's what I don't want to do. Here's what I want our culture to be. How do I do that? And I look to lots of other people to inspire me to explain how they do what they do and think about it and think about how I make a system that implements those principles.
Hmm.
And I do love that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you know a lot of stuff, and from that, like you have a lot of connections, but you also have a lot of data. And so I'm sure that that sort of informs your decision process in some way, shape, or form. And like, how do you, I guess, how do you use the data, and how do you see I'm sure you do, but do you see distinct differences between regions on like what people are into, or kids?
So you'll find this really interesting.
Okay.
You've like
She's
pushed that
excited.
button, Nick. Okay. Okay. So largely there aren't real differences between regions. And it's mostly because parents are parents, and parents tend to have the same kinds of distribution of interests. So you've got some parents who are extremely, like, their families are very into sports. Some of them are very into art. Some of them are very into STEM. And I'm always trying to encourage that interdisciplinary, try this, try this, try this. Here, you have it all in one place to try.
Mhm.
But so the things, when I look at people's accessing of the site, it's actually based on 3 different parameters. Okay, so it's
Mhm.
based on the seasons of the year, literally meaning the temperature,
Mhm.
but also meaning the school patterns. So here in the Northeast, kids get out of school in mid to late June, whereas in the South and in parts of the West, they get out in May.
Yeah.
And so when people access the site, largely has to do with that.
Mhm.
People are interested in holidays, and the holidays are the same everywhere, except between Canada and the US. So there are some
Sure.
like that.
Difference there.
So we have a big ramp up at the beginning of the summer and to the 4th of July. Huge ramp up to Halloween, big ramp up to the December holidays also. So those patterns are the same. And parents are, relatively interested in things in the same way, about the same number, at least the same percentage fraction of the population access our site. About the same population are looking at sports and STEM and arts things. I've seen trends over the years. Like, I watched the whole indoor trampoline stuff come into being in like the
Mhm.
late aughts and see how that grew. And then there was a pandemic, and pretty much across the board, 15% of the organizations that had been posting to the site went out of business
Yeah.
in the pandemic. Because think about what it is that we're promoting: experiences, in-person
Right.
experiences. So it is the thing that I learned and got me really super interested in data, is how remarkably the same people behave in groups, even though each of us is just an individual acting in our own interests, acting in our kids' interests. In the aggregate, it is so predictable.
Mhm.
So
That's crazy. That's
yeah, it's
crazy.
fun.
I would never have thought that. And because, like, I used to do a lot of different events that I planned for alumni
Mhm.
experiences, right? And you would always hear, like, oh, well, alumni in the Hudson Valley don't do things like alumni in New York City or whatever. Like they're not interested in the same things.
That
And
may be true, but aside from the borough of Manhattan, where we
right,
don't have a site, because family life is really different in Manhattan than it is
sure,
almost everywhere
anywhere
else.
else, yeah,
We pretty much they pretty it actually has a little bit more to do with the drivability of a region
right.
than with and sort of like how compressed and difficult to get to things there are.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And I can see that. So if you talk about like even the Hudson Valley area, that there's the Hudson River, and people on one side of the bridge don't want to do things on the
you're
other side of the
so
bridge.
right.
Like that's it. We're not going because traffic, right? So, or
Mhm.
even like I know people like I don't want to go to that side of town, and like my town is like tiny.
Right.
So I get it. Well, that's cool. I mean, so data plays a, again, an important role,
Mhm.
and I know this other, we started talking a little bit about the solar eclipse and that experience.
Yep.
How did that kind of relate? I know you organized or helped organize with this group of people, like a whole bunch of things for people to do.
Yeah.
Um, so how did that kind of work with kids out and about?
So one of the nice things is that my job as chair of the task force for Rochester, And by the way, now co-chair of the task force for the country for the American Astronomical Society.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a lot of work, and it still
Yeah.
kind of is because we still have some wrap up. But
Sure.
it's no, it's wonderful because I don't actually have to do anything.
Mm.
All I have to do is cheer. I don't
Yeah.
work for anybody, right? I work for myself. I was not doing anything. And the deep irony of all of this is that I don't like running events.
Mhm.
Um, I don't like I don't like everything coming down to this like one point. I promote events. I
Mhm.
spread the word about things. I don't run them myself. I
Mhm.
don't envy anybody who has to worry about the weather, who has to
Yeah.
worry about whether you've spread the word enough, whether you've shoehorned yourself into people's consciousness just enough to bring enough people to spend enough money to make your vendors happy or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do any of that. I just get to promote. I get the easy job. But the thing that that is hugely important about people leading communities or who want to stick a community together is you have to be willing, A, to do a lot of work, B, to glue people together, to keep nagging them, to keep them on the straight and narrow, and to be motivated to want to be with all these other people going toward this one goal. And so it has to be fun. Even if
Mhm.
you're like, I've not really had to do something that's like negative, like, I don't know, try to solve some big worldwide problem or anything. I can't imagine what that would be. I've just had to take advantage and make the most of this incredible opportunity that nature gave us, right? It's an
Right.
entirely positive thing. It's not a negative thing. So I had like a leg up in that. Um, but it had to be fun to go to those meetings. And how do you make things fun? Well, as I say, and as my children call me, I am a painfully cheerful dork about this. And like, fortunately, I'm fairly energetic and I don't like lose momentum on that. But I'm also really glad to just like sort of laugh at myself and my painful cheerfulness. Like, and people are like, "Are you really like that?" I'm like, yeah, I actually really am. This isn't an
She
act. I'm
is.
like
She
all
is.
the
It's
time.
great.
My children who are introverts find it exhausting.
Mhm.
Um, Anyhow, so but you have to be that way. You have to be constantly thinking, how do I glue these people together? How do I keep connecting them with each other? And it's fairly straightforward, right? Send out a newsletter a lot.
Mhm.
Send out, celebrate what this person is doing over here with the rest of the group. People do not brag about themselves, brag about people. And I've had
Right.
a whole career of setting up a platform to brag about the great things that are happening. So I knew the language to talk in, but also deliberately connect with each other, the right people with each other.
Mhm.
So listen, you need to have your tentacles out into the whole cat community. You need to be like this sort of central repository of knowledge of who's who, so that you're listening to one person, then you're saying, I know who you should talk to.
Mhm.
You need to talk to this person. Let me connect you guys. And the weird external permission to connect these two people, it actually does connect them. They have this now that I've like is sort of infused the you must connect with each
Yeah.
other. They do it. I've made it easy, but it also overcomes that awkward barrier of, hello, I'm this person. No, it's like, no, you guys have to talk. And how you do that. Visit Rochester, by the way, is the organization that I modeled the task force on,
Mhm.
because they set up systems to have regular monthly meetings where the members themselves are not just passive recipients of information, but active participants in the whole process. And they're helping paint a picture with the leadership of Visit Rochester of a future in which everybody's benefiting. So they're brilliant. They set that up over 40 years ago, and that was what I modeled it on. But also, as a leader, I had no allegiance to anybody in particular, right? The three main pillars of the task force were the Rochester Museum and Science Center, Visit Rochester, and the Genesee Transportation Council. They're all actual organizations. They all
Mhm.
have to answer to people. They have to answer to boards, and they have to answer to their standing in the community was important. I told everybody, blame me for anything. If
Mhm.
somebody gets on your case, just blame me, because like I don't work for anybody. I don't have, it's not a reputational thing. My success isn't based on, although like I enjoy a fun reputation, but if anybody needs to take heat, I can take it. I can absorb it with no consequence. Um, because I know that you guys have to answer to more masters than just yourself, and that's hard. So let me help you do that. So that was a huge advantage that not many communities have. So Dan Schneiderman, the other main leader of this task force, he works for the Rochester Museum and Science Center. And so he had to have the whole region in mind and the RMSC in mind, a very difficult thing. Of course, he was actually paid for the whole thing. And so not being paid for it gives you an immense amount of freedom, because you can't be fired as long as you're doing the thing that you set out for everybody to do. So just keeping that energy up to the end and through the end, and keeping celebrating, just like the vivid celebration of success. Anybody can self-designate to be somebody like that. Look at the name of your podcast. And but anybody can do that. Anybody can be that sort of ambassador for the terrific things.
And that's very inspiring. And that's kind of like, again, one of the key ideas of the show is I'm going to tell everybody what Debra Ross is doing in the effort that maybe they'll join you, or they'll start their own, right? Like in their own, regions, to kind of like, put a task force together for a solar eclipse or whatever.
Right.
But what I love your whole view on connecting people, because that is so key to the success, like, of the show, to the success of like all the things that I do with data science, the Center of Excellence. It's all about connecting. And what I love about like my current job, it's like it's connected to everything else that I do. Even if I can't find that next data partnership, someone could be on That Sounds Terrific. Or if they don't have something terrific to celebrate and they have a scary story, they could be on That Sounds Terrifying. If if none of that applies, but they have kids, then I can direct them over to the Kids Out and About and talk about like, that. So I love doing that. And it gets me so excited to hear like all the different things that you're talking about connecting people and the benefits of that.
About how much more important that is now than it was pre-pandemic. If you watch the effects of the pandemic on huge swaths of our society, and I fundamentally mean the young people, especially, people who would have been gaining kind of muscle memory for connection in college or in early parts of their career, who were denied that for years. We see the effect of that. They are unskilled in this. My own children are unskilled in this. They're 23 and 24. Because they didn't, and in part because they're introverts, but also in part because they didn't have that opportunity. And so the developing of systems to glue us together physically, I actually really kind of mean in person. Not that this Zoom conference isn't great, and not that like we can do this in a way, but it's based on our actually connecting as people in person rather than just like sort of faces on screen. And so what I'd love to challenge everybody in the audience to think of a small or large network that they can create. And all you have to do is decide you're that person. You're giving other people permission to connect. You've just done an incredible service for those folks, because there's huge barriers to that now. Just psychological and sort of just cultural barriers. Awkwardness, culture barriers among especially young people. People, my age, like I have, some friends who are just out in the dating world again, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's 30 years, I haven't done this. And the world is completely different. People don't meet each other the same way they used to anymore. And it's so hard. And I would argue it's just so detrimental to our mental health.
I have a few friends that are going through that, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy. And and my wife, she's always saying, "Oh, you've got so many relationships and things like." I'm like, "All right, I got this one. I don't want this one to change because, for a lot of different reasons, because I love her, but also I don't want to do anything that's going on in the social world as far as dating goes. Like, never again." But I think there's a lot to what you're saying. Like, start a group, put together, there's nothing stopping you. There's no boundaries. Like, with the one, arguably good thing about the pandemic is that it opened up a new world as far as possible connections, that you can do things hybrid or,
Mhm.
completely remote. And like, I think that that's a good thing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
also, that being said, there are so many people that I know of from these virtual groups that, I even created a career support group, and there's a bunch of people that I have not honestly met in person. But when we would organize like in-person meetings to kind of meet up, or we were in each other's city
Yeah.
and we met up, it was like meeting, an old friend or relative, right? Like, and it was a different aspect. And I felt like the relationship and that connection enriched so much more than I think it would have if like we always met in person. Like
I
there was a
see,
deeper
sure.
connection, right?
And you can do it more frequently too. Like
Hmm.
so like there were in our case there were 174 active members of the task force, but 750 in total, lots of lurkers.
Yeah.
And so I do not begrudge the lurkers. I wanted them to lurk. Let them get the emails, let them see what's
Mhm.
happening. Let them feel some kind of connection even if they weren't actively doing something.
Yeah.
Um
That
and
was
so
me. I
yeah,
was a lurker. You sent me the messages and I forwarded things along, and
excellent.
U of R got involved at a point, right?
That's right. Mhm.
So but yeah, I mean, you're doing like, this could be like a 7-part episode because you
Hey,
really are
it's
like
going to be a book though, just so
it,
you know.
yeah. Oh, well,
Um,
tell us about that a little bit.
yep.
I mean,
So in the middle of writing with one of the relationships that I made during the pandemic was with a writer from Forbes named Jamie Carter, who
mhm.
is a science writer primarily. So he writes for Forbes and Space.com and Sky and Telescope
Oh
and
wow,
lots of
cool.
others. And he's British. And he also runs a website called whenistheNextEclipse.com because he loves eclipses and has been doing
Yeah.
this for a while. So he and I together are writing a book called, at least the working title is Secrets from the Shadow.
Oh
And
wow.
it's a book, a business community and personal success. We have to figure out the subtitle,
Yeah.
but basically what everybody looking up together, what that experience, how that the lessons we can learn from it.
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of lessons from that. And so Jamie has talked to hundreds and hundreds of people. So he's got lots of stories to
Sure.
plug in. And I'm primarily the structure person. But there's a lot of things. There's a lot of like think about risk.
Yeah.
Risk is something that for one thing, I worry a lot about kids today and risk because the safety first generation got ushered in a couple of decades ago. And
Mhm.
it makes me worry a whole lot about entrepreneurship and the future of entrepreneurship. And the idea that safety has to come first before any kind of like that any kind of risk is bad is just
Mhm.
a really dangerous one sort of for society, but also for personal fulfillment, right? There's no
Yeah.
great reward without some risk. And just teaching everybody to play it safe only
Yeah.
is, I think, a
Well, you
real
don't
risk.
learn too, right? You
Right.
don't learn. If you're not taking a risk, you're not making like, big mistakes, make them big, and then
Right.
you're learning from those mistakes, right?
Mhm. So different communities for the eclipse were taking risks, financial risks on how much to offer people who were coming here, who lived here. To what degree do you have a festival? To what degree, like how much, what is that dice being rolled?
Sure.
What are they, how big do the dice need to be? And like what are the factors involved? Um, from personally, if you have booked your stay in Indianapolis, what if it's cloudy? Are you going to be in Indianapolis and experience the amazing thing that is an eclipse under clouds, or are you going to chase the sun? So you have the eclipse from a personal experience, risk from a
Yeah.
personal experience, and risk from a business experience, and risk from as a community. Um, and that's in fact partly to mitigate there's a real risk in defining success on only one dimension, like financial, right?
Right.
So if we in Rochester defined success just on how much tourists spent in Rochester between April 5th and April 8th of 2024, well, not that much because lots of the tourists chased the sun and didn't stay here, and they either went west or east depending on where the sun happened to be on April 8th. Um, and also if we had been successful with the sun and huge amount, that money would already have been spent by now, right? So
Right.
that's not necessarily a lasting impact, even though the stories last. But defining success as the relationships that were generated, the different kinds of structures that people made, the interest in and knowledge about science that got to be
Mhm.
spread. Like that's an entirely different sort of thing. The identity of a community as a community who cares about this, that is going to last. And when people look back at the end of the 21st century, at the highlights of the 21st century, they're going to think of 2024 here. Absolutely, no question. And that's a kind of success that you can't even really measure. But mark my words. And so this book will be talking about a lot of those kinds of things and putting in the stories of the inspiring people who, on all these different dimensions, like, there's the chapter 2 is, if not me, who? It's exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Why should, if somebody's going to do this, well, that somebody could just be you. And you're not being that sort of someone. Okay, be that sort of someone if that's what you want to accomplish. And, don't risk too much. Don't risk all your time. Don't risk all your money. But define, like, you don't need to, it's not a big risk to have some Zoom or in-person meetings over coffee with people who are going to, get things done. Make those meetings. So yeah, it's a fun. So I will let you know when that book is out, but
we'll have you back on the show, maybe together, and
thank
talk
you.
about it. I
Yeah,
think that'd
bring
be kind of
Jamie
a
on
cool.
too. He's great. He's got a British accent.
Yeah, well, definitely invited then. Love the British accent. Love any accent. It goes back to like my whole improv thing. So,
Right.
well, Debra, is there anything else, like we've talked about a lot, and I know you've got a lot more, but is there anything else that you definitely want to share? I mean, you're doing it all that I could
Well,
think
I
of.
guess so. The one main the one, I talked when I was giving a talk to to the Gergen Institute for Data Science
Sure.
graduates. I said something really startling to them, but it's something that I believe in really, really profoundly, which is, I said, you all think you're going into data science because you love math and you love this computer stuff and everything, but you're really going into sales. And I think a lot of them were looking at me like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about, lady? I didn't want to go into sales. I'm not a salesperson. But everybody is in sales to a certain extent.
Right.
And it doesn't, sales has a bad rap, right? Sales, you conjure up this sort of the person trying to get one over on somebody else. But really, and I learned this by being a parent, and I've applied it to every committee I've led, every business context that I've been in. If you're a leader, you're either a parent as a leader, you're either a salesperson or you're a dictator. It's either I'm gonna pull you, like it's either a momentum thing that I'm generating momentum and I really want to inspire you to come along with me, or I can be a because I said so kind of parent or boss or authority figure. And you can guess which one I believe in so firmly. I am very anti-authoritarian. You're not really going to learn stuff, child, if you're not inspired to learn. Nobody can force that thing into you.
Yeah.
And so I need to sell you on the utility of spending your time with me doing this thing, whatever I'm selling. If I want to sell this book, I need to sell people on the utility of their time, their precious time on earth, right? We have a limited amount of time on earth. Why should you spend it with me? And selling them on that, because no amount of making somebody do something, you can't make them think. And that's really what you want to do. You want to make them see and be inspired by the facts that you're putting in front of them really enthusiastically. And so what I told the data science students was the thing that I've done is you need to vividly love the thing that you're doing. And don't worry about embarrassing yourself with how much you love it. Just lean into the nerd, lean into the dork, and people could laugh, and that's fine, let them laugh, because you're doing that, you're living what you love. And so if you're vividly living what you love, that is sales. And so if you need to sell anything, associate with something that's good to sell, a good product or service or yourself. So that actually is kind of like one of the overwhelming messages that I try to convey both to parents who are selling kids and to employees and in businesses. It's all sales, but it's all love. And it's also all data. So
very awesome. Well, I mean, I'm sold on this. So like, if anyone else wants to connect with Debra, and why wouldn't you, right?
Thanks.
The kidsoutandAbout.com. like she'll connect you with other people. She will inspire you. There's a lot going on in the things that you do, and I just appreciate you being on the show. And I urge our audience to reach out to Deborah, check out outsandabout.com, connect with Deborah, because you will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Much appreciated, Nick. Thank you for giving me this platform and a mic to say the things that I love saying.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of That Sounds Terrific. Don't forget to check out the show notes and our website at thatsoundsterrific.com to find the contact information and the best ways to volunteer with the organizations that we feature. If you know someone that is doing terrific things and think they should be featured in a future episode, be sure to email us their name, contact info, and short description of what they're doing at thatsoundsterrific@gmail.com. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and give us some social media love by liking our Facebook page, That Sounds Terrific. Follow us on Twitter at Sounds Terrific too, and Instagram at Sounds Terrific. We love hearing your feedback on how to make our show sound even more terrific. Till next time.